Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been seeing how the megalithic Iron Age settlements followed a social stratification that was reflected in the hierarchical settlements along hilly terrains and the burial practices as well, and the walls around the hilly settlements also serving as a protection and letting the people earmark territory or land as belonging to a particular clan. Now, these kind of megalithic cultural markers permeated from the north to the south, the earliest territories being northern Karnataka and Andhra by around the turn of the second millennium BCE, following down south a few centuries later. In the upper Palar basin, depending upon the distribution of critical resources and megalithic monuments, archaeologist Darshana pointed out how a clan based segmentary society could be ascribed to the builders of dolmens and a hierarchy based chiefdom society to authors of stone circles. In the upper Gundaru basin of the Varsanadu Andipatti hills, a multicultural site that has been continuously occupied for the past 12,000 years, Iron Age habitation sites revealed conglomerations of small settlements of approximately a few hundred people each, and no hierarchy was found, observes archaeologist Selvakumar. In recreating the past of the Tamil land, not going by the territorial restriction of the state of Tamil Nadu as we know today, but a territory that was marked by a wider region with several cultural markers, language being the most important of them, we are lucky to have an old corpus of literature, namely the Sangam literature, that helps us in recreating this past, and we have been correlating Sangam literary work with archaeological and historical evidence in many places. Speaking of the emerging chiefdoms of the Iron Age settlements, Sangam literature has several poems eulogizing the last great seven patrons, the Kadayelu Vallalgal, and going by the descriptions of the hilly regions and territories ruled over by these chieftains, the descriptions perfectly fit the layout of the Iron Age settlements that we have been seeing so far. All the seven chieftains, starting with Pari, who ruled from Parambu Malay, Began at Avur, which is the Podini hills of the Palani hill range, Ori at Kolli Malay, Nalli at Nalli Malay, which is Nedungodu around the Udagai region of Ooty in the Nilgiri hills, Ai at Podihe Malay, Elini at Gudire Malay, and Adiyaman of Tahadur in the Punjaral hills. The inference being that these patrons are described as the last grade 7, the Kadayelu Vallalgal, giving us to understand that they must have had their forerunners, the first grade patrons, and even a middle set of patrons. Though we do not know them by individual names, we do know them by their clan names, like Began, who represented the Avi clan. So the first patrons could have formed the chiefdoms in the megalithic Iron Age settlements that paved the way for political states with kings and armies to emerge a whole millennia later. Remember, we saw about onomastics, the study of place names, while exploring the Dravidian Indus connect through the journey of a civilization from Indus to Vaigai by Dr. Balakrishnan IAS. We saw how hundreds of Tamil place names were found scattered in Afghanistan and Pakistan up to Gujarat and Maharashtra that exist even today. And if we look at the terrain around which the earliest megalithic societies developed in Maharashtra, that is the Vidarbha region, North Karnataka, and Andhra, the names of chiefs, their clans, and their territories, that is the chiefdom, as recorded in Sangam poetry, tally perfectly with many of the place names strewn across these regions. Dr. Balakrishnan compares some current place names in the hills surrounding the regions of Maharashtra, namely Pune, Valhe, Are, Parambi, Mantar, and Neri, to Punanadu, Vallam, Arayam, Parambu, Mandaramala, and Neri of the Tamil chieftains. Well, the similarity is very hard to ignore. Taking one more example of one of the famous chieftains, of course, not one among the seven, but nevertheless one who was eulogized in more than 20 poems in Nattine, Kurundogai, Agananuru, and Malaipadukadam, that is Nannan. In Nattine, poem 391, பொன்படு கொன்கான் நன்னன் நல்நாட்டு ஏழை குன்றம் பெறினும் பொருள்வயின் யாரோ பிரிகிற்பவரே. குவளை நீர்வார் நிகர் மலரன்ன நின் பேரமர் மழைக்கண் தென்பனி கொளவே goes the poem, and a typical situation where the hero wants to leave in search of wealth and the heroine is distraught and her beautiful eyes that are like the kuvalai flower are filled with tears, and her ever faithful Thodi, that is her friend, consoles her saying, do not worry, the hero will not leave you. He will not leave you even if the king Nannan, who rules this Nalnadu, that is this virtuous kingdom, were to gift his kingdom to him. Nannan's territory is described by Palai Padiya Perungadungo as Ponpadu Kolkana. Here, Kol plus Kana, Kol meaning the horse gram, the territory that had plenty of horse gram, which was one of the ancient crops as we saw in the Marudam episode, and Ponpadu meaning a region which was abundant in gold reserves. Dr. Balakrishnan here connects this Konganam to the Kongan regions of Maharashtra, and the Yelil Kundram is here linked to the region of the seven hills, that is Sabdashringi in Nasik, which was the seat of the ancient mother goddess Kotravai, subsequently worshipped as Ma Durga by the Marathi rulers who came there. Yelil Kundram, that is Nannan's territory, as described in Sangam literature, perfectly fits the bill with the hilly regions surrounded by well protected stone fort walls. Ponpadu, the land of gold reserves, as described in Sangam literature. The gold mines at Hatti, Karnataka, with a calibrated dating of 900 to 740 BCE, thus falling within the timeline of the early Iron Age, is very close to this Kongan region, while the major gold field of Kolar mines itself, which has been given a non-calibrated dating of 650 BCE, is a little far away. What we surmise is that there should have been several unnamed gold mines in this region as described in the Sangam works. So, in corroborating the names of these hilly territories sung in the Sangam poems to these regions of peninsular India, one has to believe that, as Dr. Balakrishnan points out, carried forward memories, people while migrating or rather pushed to further south into peninsular India, carrying their place names with them and naming new territories after their old place names. When the archaeological data from these known megalithic sites were compared with early historic trade routes, it was found that many of these megalithic sites fell exactly on the earliest known trade routes of South India, points out Dr. Udayaravi S. Murthy in his Megalithic Culture of South India's Socio-Economic Perspective. Location of a chain of megalithic settlements extending from Coimbatore to the Kaveri Delta zone is most interesting, as a major trade route in the early historic period was the route from the Malabar coast in the west through the Palghat Pass and moving east to the Kaveri Delta, running through settlements and including sites such as Kodumanal, Karur, Arikamedu, Korkai and Alangulam. This strip running through the Palghat Gap connecting western coastal region to the eastern coast had more than 30 large settlements, indicating a very commercially active trade route. The Mettur-Vellore region and the Coimbatore uplands, known for their iron, gold and semi-precious beadworking, and the regions of Korkai and Adichanallur in Tirunelveli district were all very important exchange centers. The fact that South India had a very active trade exchange with the Romans since early historic time periods is very well known, but what is most interesting is that Roman coins were found in excavations carried out in megalithic burial sites, which is of important chronological significance as it points out to the megalithic people's continuation of overseas trade right from the Iron Age till the early historic times. Megalithic South India throws up archaeological evidence, albeit very sparse, to prove that people indeed were actively engaged in overseas trade even during early Iron Age. Archaeologist Selvakumar points out a very interesting recent find in which peppercorns were found in the nostrils of a pharaoh from an Egyptian tomb dated to 1300 BCE. Pepper, domesticated from the wild in the Western Ghats, an important catch crop of South India that was exported far and wide. It was known as black gold, as literally it was exported in exchange for gold from the Romans, again as recorded in Sangam literature. We also saw in earlier episodes of the Tamil words in King Solomon's Bible from the turn of the millennium, that is around 950 BCE, with words such as ahim for the ahil or eagle wood and tuhim for the peacock, all that went from these regions. There are several pointers scattered across South India that indicate that the megalithic period was representative of an advanced society that had skilled craftsmen and metalsmiths and even engineers at work. If one were to go by a find in a megalithic burial site in Karnataka near Hosanagar at Neelaskull, the largest menhir found first by the archaeologist Narasimhaya in the year 1959. This largest menhir stands at a whopping 6 meters high, with its broadest at the base being 3 meters. And considering the fact that the megalith should be going at least 2 meters below ground level, the megalith is only about 25 to 30 centimeters thin. So, how did the megalithic people quarry, transport, and erect such a huge slab of granite? A task that would be very challenging even with the kind of technological advancements that we have today, points out Sri Kumar Menon, an archaeologist who has been researching this, and that these monuments have withstood the test of time for over 3000 years points to the fact that the megalithic builders possessed refined engineering skills and hence some knowledge of mechanics and visualization. A recent find of three ferrous objects from a site at Gadabakalle, dated to around 800 to 400 BCE, documents manufacture of mild forged steel, potentially the earliest sample of high carbon steel in South India. An iron dagger with a copper hilt, found from an Iron Age burial at Mahurjari in Maharashtra, Vidarbha, shows advanced knowledge of combining two metals together. A figure of a tiger made of copper inlaid with carnelian and sapphire, excavated from inside a cist at Kodumanal in Erode district, exhibits advanced craftsmanship. A neostud made of glass was found in the sarcophagus of a child burial in Damnalinga in the Vidarbha region, while Kodumanal and Mahurjari were two regional bead manufacturing centers supported by circumstantial evidence, as pointed out by archaeologist Rajan. Beads with radial lines, which were characteristic of South Indian megalithic etched beads, were found in large numbers in Maski, Kodumanal, and Porundal. At Mahurjari, excavations done by the archaeologist Mohanty revealed several rounded stone pieces of uniform size and weight. These stone pieces might have some significance in being used as weights and measures that has to be substantiated with further research, he points out. Bronze and copper figurines of animals like buffalo, tiger, elephants, and antelopes were found inside urn burials at Adichanallur during the excavations conducted by Alexander Ray way back between 1902 and 1903. Extensive geoarchaeological surveys of the Adichanallur region was taken up in the year 2004, and it was revealed that the so-called prehistoric burial sites were one of the longest open cast mines of ancient times. The mined materials contained copper, gold, and iron at Adichanallur and iron at nearby Krishnapuram, besides several quartz rocks. Scholars opinion that Krishnapuram got its name after iron, which was known as Krishna Ayas, black copper in Sanskrit. With evidence of smelting furnace, charcoal pieces, slag dumps over the entire area, this region presents a picture of hectic multifaceted activity. The optically stimulated luminescence OSL dating of certain copper alloy objects that were found during this excavation gave a dating of 1500 BCE, proving that the mining of copper in these regions started much earlier than was previously believed. This older dating coinciding with the entry of Iron Age into South India, the study of the metallic artifacts revealed that the technology of melting, casting, and metalworking was prevalent in that period itself. What is interesting is the usage of the mined pits as burial pits by these ancient people, where the pits that were about 3 to 6 meter deep were used to place huge urns. Alexander Ray, in his record of the excavations at Adichanallur, mentions how in the year 1906, how wells and trenches were dug up wherever quartz veins were found of varying sizes from 1.5 meters to 5 meters, and after removing the quartz rocks, these wells were also used by the prehistoric people to bury big urns containing the remains of human bones, often along with several articles made of copper, bronze, iron, steel, and some gold. In recent excavations carried between 2004 and 2006, the presence of arsenic in higher amount in some of the copper alloys from Adichanallur was recorded. Now, the use of arsenic as an alloying element was found in the Harappan civilization dated to between 3500 and 1600 BCE. Now, this has led researchers to believe that metallurgists from the Harappan region should have migrated to the south to exploit its mineral reserves after the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. The presence of skilled metallurgists from other parts of India migrating south to exploit its mineral reserves is attested to by the typological similarities of such as the copper bowls, strainers and lids that are found in Adichanallur, with same motifs appearing in Kodumanal dated to around 300 BCE, as well as in Mahurjari in Maharashtra dated to 500 BCE. Not only this, but also the recovery of potsherds from these sites that bear names such as Nigama, Visakhi, Kuviram, Varuni and Asadam of North Indian origin in Brahmi script at Kodumanal, points out archaeologist Rajan. We will continue with our exploration of these megalithic trade centers in our next episode. Vanakkam.